Today we're going to talk about the paradox of suffering. I'm sitting here on the California coast. In the distance there behind me is San Francisco. On my way back home from a nice weekend of fasting. I haven't eaten in almost 3 days now, so my mind is quite clear. Wanted to share what's coming up for me in my own healing wisdom. So the paradox of suffering. What does that mean, the paradox of suffering? What many people don't realize, and we really need to see the world with real eyes, is that much of our suffering is part of our awakening process. Part of our being able to actually awaken to our true divine nature, opening up our hearts and our souls to knowing who we truly are, is going through our suffering. Much of society is based upon us not looking at our suffering or not acknowledging our pain. But in reality, like I said, with real eyes, we can actually only know our true self when we go into our suffering. Now, some of my studying in the last few days has come down to what's called samskaras, which has a lot to do with shadow work. Samskara is essentially unconscious material. It's a word in Sanskrit that describes our unconscious material. Now, many of us today are suffering because we are unconscious to our unconsciousness. This means that the things that are below the surface, you notice I have the water behind me, below the surface that are actually running our lives, like the current below the surface. And our bodies are made up of water, and we're so unconscious to that unconsciousness that we continue to suffer because we do not have empathetic awareness around our pain. This lack of empathetic awareness is where much of our suffering comes from. And it is only when we acknowledge our pain, acknowledge our suffering, and go into it and face it, that we can actually polarize that yin and that yang energy within ourselves to know our true self. Much of our society is based upon our linear, masculine, logical thinking minds. And that's, like I said, masculine. When we actually honor our divine feminine nature, take the time to rest, take the time to honor our healing journey, then we can actually begin to know the true self. This is our yin nature. And that's what I mean by getting out to nature. Me personally, investing this time, fasting my mind, fasting my body, and allowing myself the space to do my inner healing work and facing my own emotional suffering as well. Because the more we don't acknowledge our pain, the more we do not acknowledge our suffering, we do not heal. And that's the paradox, is that we want to heal, but in order to heal, we must face our suffering. And we live in a society, you do everything you can not to face your suffering. What happens is people keep suffering. And they don't understand that I think if I take a pill, if I watch TV, if I do some kind of drug or alcohol or gamble or watch porn, I'll feel pleasure. I'll feel more pleasure. But in reality, you're just running from your pain. And I was one of those people. I'm not sitting here just trying to call people out. But I've realized through my own suffering, like years ago, I snapped my Achilles tendon. I was stuck in bed for months. It was the most rough time of my life. I had to actually face myself. But in facing myself, I discovered who I truly am. And that's the message for today, is the paradox of our own suffering. As we go deeper into our suffering, it awakens our true divine nature. So hopefully this lands for some of you. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Thank you.